Well, we're back at it again with a new Golden Queers episode from the Outwords Archive.
Can we just say a big thank you to one of our executive producers, Jack MacCarthy, for assembling a comprehensive list of podcast names?
Yes, it's because of Jack that we have an amazing name for the show. Pulling us back into focus, we're on episode 5 of the Golden Queers. Only one more episode left. It's actually kind of sad.
I know. They say that time moves fast when you're having fun, but this is record speed.
Man, don't I know it. And with that, I'm just going to introduce this episode's very special guest, Gwenn Craig. Gwenn is a lesbian woman located within the SF area and has worked hand in hand with Harvey Milk as his campaign manager. So without any further distractions, let's roll the tape, M.R.
Let's do it.
I have been in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1975 and became an activist here around 77, I guess, when I got involved with Harvey Milk's campaign on the campaign to fight back against the Briggs Initiative that a lot of people have heard about. I was one of the 2 campaign managers of that campaign here in San Francisco, and have been fighting on many fronts and in many roles since then.
Your work with Harvey Milk is something that I will definitely be coming back to, but I did want to talk about you and yourself, maybe to get a little bit of more background information on where you grew up, where you're originally from before you came to the Bay Area.
Well, I'm originally from Atlanta. I grew up there, left there to go to college in Chicago, and wound up living there for 6 years. My family was one that was involved in the civil rights movement coming up. I was born as that was a very active part of living in the South. My family, many family members were very engaged with various sit-ins, some running for office in those early days.
So you've always been a part of some sort or around some sort of activism since a very early age.
Yes. And it was all around me. Atlanta was a vibrant time for being sort of the headquarters of the Black Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King was someone that, I knew where his house was.
Oh my gosh.
I could walk past his house to and from school if I took a certain route to go with one of my friends and walk her home first and that sort of thing. Ralph Abernathy, his lieutenant, used to throw parties for teenagers, so we wouldn't get in trouble, So he would have parties that were sort of alternatives in the basement of his home that my mother encouraged me to always go to. And, Andy Young was a friend of our family, and Joseph Lowry was the pastor of our church. And so all of these civil rights figures, were people that were, people who were interactive, with the people that were part of my family and part of our, people that we associated with. They were part of our community in Atlanta.
Of course, definitely. So, what was it like growing up in Atlanta I know it wasn't an easy time, but for you yourself with your family growing up, what was that like? What was that environment like?
We grew up in a very separate but equal society. Not much interaction with the white community for the most part of my life. I say that because there were only occasional times when we might venture into, downtown. I remember going to the Fox Theater in downtown Atlanta and seeing a movie there and having to go up into the back entrance and all the way up the stairs up into the balcony. We didn't normally sort of come face to face with that sort of discrimination because we lived in our own communities, so forth. So we didn't try to go to segregated places very much. My grandmother lived in rural Georgia, and I had a little more experience with coming face to face with some of the barriers there and the rules that you had to follow. And, there were some experiences that I had there. Um, my senior year of high school, the high school that I had been going to, I went to a small Black Catholic high school, and it closed for lack of enrollment. Not quite enough Black Catholics in Atlanta. So we had a choice of which of the Catholic high schools to go to. And the one that was the most academically strenuous was one that had never been integrated before. It was all white. And my parents and I chose that I would go to that one. And so I became one of the group of Black students to integrate that high school. So that was sort of my firsthand experience with entering into a setting where I had to encounter, people who were experiencing us for the first time.
What a culture shock to both communities, I feel like, especially when I'm very fortunate enough to grow up in Los Angeles, California, where it is a melting pot of different cultures and ethnicities and food, but to be so separate within a place that
Yes.
we all live in. And then, what a culture shock that must have been.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this was by then, I graduated from high school in 1968. And by this time, I think it was a much more welcoming society than I might have found, in my parents' time, say.
Right.
The one anecdote I have of where, there was the most outrageous behavior was because of one of the white nuns
Oh,
who you would expect it to know better.
tell me why it's always the white nuns. Tell me why it's always the white nuns. They are always on some extra stuff.
Yes. So, but the kids of our generation, for the most part, I will say, with a couple of notable exceptions, for the most part, we're great. We're trying to be very welcoming and very open and trying to be learning. and
And you know what? That's so great to hear, because when I think of the 60s and when I think of
yeah,
like the civil rights movement, there really is this stark black and white difference between
right, right.
communities. And there's so many other narratives and stories that consist alongside that timeline that we just don't ever hear about. So to hear that white peers within your time were willing to learn and understand, that's kind of nice, because you don't hear that. It's never
Yes,
explained to you that those people existed. I mean, obviously these people existed because we've gotten to where we are today because of this
yes,
like-minded thought.
right, right.
When in your life did you start identifying as lesbian, correct?
Well, it was after high school.
It was after high
uh,
school.
yes.
But did you not have these feelings, be it in high school for a friend or middle school for did these feelings or crushes not come up during this time?
Well, it's all interesting in hindsight. I look back, and think, you know, maybe, maybe what that was really about was this and that sort of thing. But, I fell into the norms of the day, and
Mm.
wondering about who am I going to go to prom with and who I wound up picking out with no thought of it. Honestly, at the time was I went to prom with a gay boy. who was not out, who, I seem to have a talent for picking up the fellow travelers.
You had an affliction.
Yes. Why did we get along so well?
And now you're like, makes sense.
Right.
Gwenn's like, my gaydar was going off, but I didn't know it was a gaydar at the time.
Yes. So, who came out as soon as he graduated and went off to college. And then he was writing to me and telling...
He was like, bye, suckers, I'm out.
Yes.
Oh,
then
that's so
he was
funny.
telling me all about what he was doing and how he was feeling and how he felt so free and everything. But in high school, no.
Yeah, I still feel like, when you live with parents, it is a little bit harder to feel like you can be yourself. And I think this is especially true for marginalized communities as well. So, you did a lot of work with, Harvey Milk and everything. How did you end up there?
Quite by accident. Just...
Why is that everyone's story?
The anti-war movement was at its height, and the whole Black Power movement had been at its height also. So I thought, I'm leaving that behind. I'm going to go inside in San Francisco. That was the place for it. But I came here just at the height of... there was a whole explosion of the gay movement. What really started it off politically was going to rallies that were starting to happen because of what was happening. A woman named Anita Bryant was trying to lead a movement against these darn gay people and what they're doing against our children, because if they cannot reproduce, they must recruit, was their slogan, to overturn a gay rights ordinance that the city council there had passed. People in San Francisco saw this happening there, and it had already been overturned in 3 or 4 other cities across the country, and we were starting to get scared. We were starting to see that things were rolling backwards all of a sudden where we'd been making progress. And I went to one of these big rallies that is starting about how we're going to respond to this. What can we do from here? And I started talking about how we really needed a media strategy. This was going to be a media campaign. We needed to respond to media stories, blah, blah, blah. I started talking about this so much and so passionately that they finally said, "Oh, why don't you work on that?" And I said, "Oh, what have I done now?" And I knew that there was one person in the gastro who was on TV a lot, was in the papers a lot. He was the mayor of Castro Street, they called him. And he owned the camera store just 2 blocks from me. And that was a guy named Harvey Milk. So I got up the gumption to go talk to him and said, "Hi, here's who I am. And I've been made this media coordinator. And I thought maybe you might have some ideas and could help." And boy, did he.
Oh my
He
gosh.
swept me into the back of his camera store and sat me down and just went into a tutorial
Oh my.
and gave me resources and everything, gave me his map of how to drive around to all of the media outlets in the city, newspapers, offices, radio stations, TV, and just mentored me from that point forward, work together. And you've got to work on my campaign now, you realize. It just set off from there.
Wow, honestly, what a time to have been alive, to have been through Castro, the Bay Area has always been in an uproar, but I feel like at that time, Harvey Milk, specifically that area, gay rights movement, I feel like a lot of pivotal moments happened within that time frame.
Yes.
And you were the right-hand man.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of other people there
totally not just
holding
Craig.
on to the wheel,
Right,
too.
But
Yeah, and things were happening. And, when they started looking for, the press started calling because here was my name on this press release they had received, So they'd say, oh, okay, we're calling you because we've got this story and you have a statement to make. Well, Harvey Milk certainly taught me to respond with a statement, be ready. And before you knew it, I was constantly being quoted in newspapers, appearing on the radio, appearing in a newspaper, TV station. Life became very hectic and very public. It was just at that point that I realized, gosh, I think I better come out to my parents,
I don't know why I'm so compelled to fangirl over this, but it was so fascinating to hear about Gwen's upbringing and how her family was involved in the civil rights movement. You already know for a fact my Aqua son was living, but also hearing about it makes me understand Gwen's work with Harvey Milk, a human being that needs no introduction, but a little refresher for folks. Harvey Milk was the first openly gay man elected in public office. And how wild is it that Gwenn begins speaking publicly for, at the time, what was called the LG movement, and it's the reason she felt like she had to come out to her parents. Now, obviously, we aren't Gwenn, so she can't answer these questions, but if you were in her shoes, M.R, would you have come out?
Wow. First of all, how bananas for Gwenn to grow up in this world. And the question that you're asking is such a good one because there's so much to consider, especially given the time period. I want to say, hell yes, that I would have done exactly what Gwenn did, but I think especially considering that she's a woman of color, her decision to come out during that time would have been at the crossroads of gender and race-based discrimination, and honestly danger during that time. And then adding in sexual orientation to that mix, I mean, Gwenn is truly a pioneer for all of us who have been outspoken about our identities in the decades following her coming out. I would also hope to invoke a little bit of Mia here, that I might feel if I came out that I could set the path for others in a similar position to feel more confident to come out, channeling some of this visionary spirit, but it's so hard to know. What do you think though, Jae?
I just want to thank you for bringing that up, M.R, because the lived queer WOC experiences is so vastly different. Gwenn and I chat about this exact quote-unquote crossroads and how, specifically during Gwenn's time, it was dangerous to be out. And we're talking life and death. And it's really unfortunate to say that in some POC communities, that's still the case. So with you, I salute her on even publicly advocating for our rights. Let's continue rolling the tape.
That was actually going to be my follow-up question about you being so public about gay rights. So this prompted you to come out to your parents.
Yeah, because I thought,
gosh, what was that like?
I've become suddenly public spokesperson for this LGBT movement, and I haven't done the scut work of talking to my family, letting them know there's been this transformation. Ready or not, here I am.
And so how was that received?
It was received much more positively than I think I could ever have hoped.
Do you think it was because of your parents' involvements within the civil rights movement and wanting acceptance, for a group of people? Do you think that might have been a reason that they were so open?
I think that's very possible. I mean, my mother's initial response was all about me personally. She said she just worried about my personal safety.
Right. I mean, yeah, of
that
course.
was her chief concern. This is very public. It was pulling a lot of people out who were, about hate, and she just worried, was I making myself vulnerable to this? It really hadn't, at that point, sort of touched Atlanta in the ways that it was touching other cities. I think her exposure came through what she was seeing on the news and what she was seeing in the newspapers about happening in other cities. So that was her chief concern. And but she was very that was it, there was no I'm disappointed, life is not turning out the way I thought, or it just moved so well that I thought, gosh, if I known it was going to be that easy, I would have done this weeks ago.
Gwen was like, oh, that was it.
Yes. So moving on. Some years later, when the 1984 Democratic National Convention was in San Francisco, I was a delegate to that convention. I'd been a delegate to the 1980, 4 years earlier as well. But in 84, I went and I was co chair of the Lesbian Gay Caucus of Delegates. Because San Francisco, the news people were playing up, oh, well, San Francisco is known for its large gay community and movement and everything. So they had me and my co-chair on for an interview during the convention. And so now we're on the Today Show.
You went on the Today Show?
Yeah. Brian Gumble.
Oh, my Lord.
So I was certainly glad that I had done the work of coming out to my family by then. Because of the time difference, they needed us to be in the studio around somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m. It was just, So I get back home finally after this, and it's about now between 4 and 5. And my phone rings. I think, oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
And it's an old friend of my mother's who lives in New York. And she says, I just want you to, I don't know if you remember me. And I just want you to know, I just saw you on the Today Show. And I want you to know that whatever you're doing is fine with me. I'm all for you.
That is hilarious. Like, thanks.
It was very sweet. It was awkward and sweet. And I was just so touched. But I thought, thank goodness my mother had a heads up.
Yeah, right. Thank God my mom has such an open friend in her corner. I'm going to backpedal here a little bit because I'd asked this question. Okay. So you graduated high school and you went off to college. Yeah. Where did you go to college?
Mundelein College. It was a small Catholic women's college, no longer in existence. It folded into Northwestern University in Chicago.
I see.
And while I was there, in fact, most people didn't even realize that we weren't part of Northwestern. We were right on their border. And a lot of people didn't realize we were a separate institution, but we were, small as we were.
There's a lot of pride within small schools. I know that.
That's right.
But so in college, I'm assuming you had the freedom, the capacity, possibly even the comfortability to explore your identity a bit more, no?
In some ways, yes. And in some ways, no. Chicago is actually where I met the father of my daughter and had her. So I became a mom in Chicago. My daughter wound up going to live in the care of my parents. And so she had that Atlanta upbringing that I had in the end. But we lived together in Chicago for some years. And it was actually when I was planning to move out to San Francisco that I traveled with her first to Atlanta. And my parents said, don't you think maybe, you're going to be going to San Francisco? You don't quite know what you're going to be doing.
They're like, you want to bring a kid?
Provide all this. Yeah.
They're like, you sure you want to do that?
She wound up having a wonderful education and musical upbringing that has served her very well. She got to visit San Francisco as much as she liked. But my time in Chicago was taking up a lot with single parenting.
I see. So it wasn't until you were within the glorious gay walls of San Francisco that you were able to be yourself, I guess you could say.
Yes.
LGBTQ plus, women of color experience, especially being or non-binary person of color experience is very,
Right.
very different. And I wouldn't say too much,
Yes.
but there are stark
Yes.
differences between, someone who is white and identifies within the spectrum.
Yeah. Atlanta is a very blacker city, much more so. Chicago more so. And one of my sort of culture shocks in moving to San Francisco was that it was very hard to find the Black community. When I came here was when the Western Addition had been devastated, had just been wiped clean by urban renewal. You would roll through the streets of the Fillmore Western Addition area, and it looked like someone had bombed the place. I mean, whole tracts of land had just been demolished, the housing and everything. And the few areas that still had Black people living there, I mean, they were few and far between. But it was still claimed as, Black neighborhoods. But, the number of people and community institutions were small and getting smaller by the day. The next neighborhood that I wound up living in after the Castro was the Lower Haight. I lived right at the intersection of Haight and Fillmore. There was a lot of agitation at that point happening between the Black and gay community. And it was mainly over the housing crisis. A lot of tension over rising rents, and a lot of the African American community was being encouraged to blame the increasing numbers of gay people moving to San Francisco for why rents were so high, getting higher, why speculation was the new buzzword for what was causing the housing crisis in San Francisco. So those were bad times that caused conflicts, that I seem to find myself stepping into on many occasions and trying to be a peacemaker and negotiator and that sort of thing. It didn't work out very well on many
Wow.
instances.
So that must have really
Um,
shaped the way that you experience both cultures and communities.
yes, it did. Yes, it did. It was an interesting time. It was a tough time in many ways, but I made a lot of very strong and dear relationships during that time, nonetheless, and there were people who, proved to be dedicated, um, to be dedicated to community strength and involvement and trying to see through some of the antagonisms and the fake premises that were being developed for why we should be at odds with one another. You know, we had to do a lot during the whole Briggs Initiative campaign for the people who were trying to encourage the African American community to vote against us based on some of these issues that were really untrue, fake premises, for who we were and for what this community was really about and that sort of thing. It still goes on to some extent, but I think we were very successful during that time in bringing people around from engaging in some of the negative impulses that people were encouraged to bow into. So I left, I think, feeling that in some ways it was a blessing because it allowed us to really have some conversations we might not have had otherwise. And a lot of people that we wound up talking with during those times, I think benefited from those conversations in ways that were very meaningful. So we developed some very good and lasting long-term relationships out of that.
And out of these long-term relationships, I'm assuming, is this where you met your current partner?
No, that came much later.
Oh, really?
I became involved with the Democratic clubs in San Francisco, which is where the organizing really happened. It became sort of like the basis for where people did political work in San Francisco. And this is gay and straight, all ethnicities and everything. In San Francisco, it seems to be organized around this component. And so I had joined, there were two gay Democratic clubs at the time. And one, the Alice B. Toklas Democratic Club, that was the name of it. And then the new club that founded, which Harvey had been instrumental in helping to found, was the San Francisco Gay Democratic Club. And their whole basis was that they thought there should be a club that had gay right in the title. It was up front, in your face, told people right in the title who we were, that expressed our identity, that told other activists, we are here in the room. You didn't have to be in on the joke about who Alice B. Toklas was to know you're a gay club and that sort of thing. So that became my political home. And it's where Harvey was. It's where the activists were who became part of the whole No 06 campaign. And so that's sort of been my political home ever since. And that was the place actually where I met my current partner. All of the progressive LGBT people have sort of veered to that political home for doing work. And the Alice Club has been sort of geared more to people who wanted a more moderate place to do work and be aligned with, the power brokers and so forth. So that was really where we wound up finding each other and connecting. Yeah.
And so, what was it about her?
Well, this is where she would tell you that I should take no credit whatsoever in making any discoveries. She loves to tell how much she had to pursue me.
Oh, so you were the one being chased.
That I was totally oblivious.
Oh, it just went right over your head, didn't it?
Yeah, she's right. I can't deny it. She asked me out a couple of times for, maybe we should go out and have coffee sometimes. Well, I gotten so used to sort of younger, she's only 7 years younger than me, but still I thought, saying, oh, I'd love to talk with you sometimes about your history, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we could have coffee. So I thought this was another intrigue like that. And I said, sure, I would like that. Yeah, let's do that sometime. But sort of, it was put off to when I have time. I'm so busy.
Yeah, right. It was just, later.
And so she finally sort of, I think she emailed me and said, look,
she said,
I'm asking you for a date. Okay. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Oh.
Folks, you can't see how stressed I am over this audio, but I'm stressed.
I am just so awkward still at my long.
Oh no, it's endearing.
Years.
No. That's why she pursued you.
Yes.
And so how many years have you been together now?
19. It'll be 20 in August.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
Oh, happy early anniversary.
But she will not let me forget. She
don't look at you on the anniversary and be like, we here 20 years because of me, babe.
Yes.
And so you guys have stayed
Yes. And I didn't realize how much we have in common, how simpatico we are on so many levels, in so many ways, on so many things that are very different from one another. Um, we both like football,
Really?
or at least I'm into the 49ers more than anything. I mean, she was into fantasy football and everything.
Oh,
She was
she's
much
in
heavier
it, in
into it than
it.
I was.
Yeah, she's got,
She was
yeah.
into it. So that part I had to sort of learn about. Um, but movies and food and travel and everything, we just seem to have the same feelings about it. And politics, we sort of gravitate to the same issues in the same ways. And, it certainly helps that we're both women of color.
Right.
She is Chicana and I'm African American, but we have sort of that same grounding
Yeah.
that comes from being women of color
Yeah.
that, makes us react in the same ways about issues. And just the way we feel about how power is handled in this country.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We have we have the same attitudes about that, and how the Democratic Party should be messaging. We just can get so passionate and stirred up, it seems, about the same subjects. And she doesn't mind that I'm totally obsessed with the Oscars and want to watch all the nominated films before the show. So from the silliest and smallest to the things that make us want to change the world. She admires me for some things. I admire her for so much. She's a great writer. And does such great work for her community, and we're a good match.
That is so lovely. That's also a very lovely note to end this podcast on. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking with me.
Thank you. It's been a lovely visit.
Aw. All right, everyone. To everyone listening, we hope you have a very good day or night or afternoon, whatever the case may be. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I hope you're sitting with a drink while you're listening to this. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
You know what? It's pretty cliche to keep saying, this is my fave, when all these conversations are special to me. But yet again, this is my fave.
I mean, there's nothing cliche about us, Jae, but I know what you mean.
Catch us next time on The Golden Queers. Bye, folks.
Besitos, friends.
The Golden Queers is produced, hosted, and edited by Jae Singh and M.R. Raquel, with music provided by Karl Casey at White Bat Audio. Find The Golden Queers online at thegoldenqueers.org. Executive producers for the Outwords Archive are Jack MacCarthy and Bliss, and Outwords Executive Director is Mason Funk. Outwords captures, preserves, and shares the stories of LGBTQ+ elders to build community and catalyze social change. More info at theoutwordsarchive.org. That's Outwords, WORDS. The Golden Queers is funded by a generous grant from the California State Library's Oral History Project. Special thanks to this week's storyteller, Gwenn Craig. Additional thanks to Gordon Tan and Jude Patton.